with the Rashis and Tosafot for the oral test. So we're in Gemara Brachot, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, toward the bottom. Gemara, Shma Mina mitzvot tzrichot kavana. Deduced from it that mitzvot require intention. The Gemara is making an inference now from the Mishnah that based on the Mishnah, which said that in a case where someone was reading from a Sefer Torah and it happened to be time for Shema and they were reading the words of Shema, they would only fulfill their obligation if they had intent. So therefore, the Gemara infers all mitzvot require intent. My imkivin libo. But what does it mean when it said in the Mishnah, if he intends in his heart? The Gemara answers likrot, to read. In order to fulfill his obligation, he has to have the intention to read. The Gemara rejects this answer by saying likrot v'haka kare. How could it be that the Mishnah was talking about a case where it was saying you have to have intention to read? To read? That's what you have to have intention for? Behold, he was already reading. In the beginning of the case, haya korei b'Torah. The person was reading. How could it be that the person was reading without the intent to read? So the Gemara answers, b'korei lahagia. It was a case where the person was reading in order to correct. So therefore, in the beginning of the case, the person was reading to correct, not reading. And in order to fulfill his obligation, he needs to have the intent in kivin libo likrot, to read. So Rashi and Tosafot have to explain this Gemara a little further. What does it mean b'korei lahagia, and therefore what does kavana actually mean? So Rashi starts from the beginning. Gemara, Shma Mina mitzvot tzrichot kavana, sheyehe mitkaven l'shem mitzvot. So Rashi explains that when the Gemara brings this inference that mitzvot require intent, it was actually saying that, right, that behold, that you would have to have intention for the sake of mitzvot, right? That when you perform a mitzvah, in order to fulfill it, you need to have the intention that you are performing a mitzvah, and that's why you're doing that action. V'tikashel Rabbah, and this presumption is difficult according to Rabbah. To Amar b'Masechet Rosh Hashanah, hatukei lashir yatsa. So this assertion that mitzvah require kavana is difficult for Rabbah, who says in Masechet Rosh Hashanah that someone who blows a shofar for a song would fulfill their obligation, which seems to be contradictory with our Mishnah, which said, right, im kivein libo yatsa, you can't just be reading, you need to have kavana. Rashi kivein likrot, aval latzei idei mitzvah lo ba'inan, right? So when the Gemara ends up saying, no, you don't have to have the kavana to fulfill a mitzvah, but you do need to have kavana to read, it's implying, but to fulfill the mitzvah, we don't require, right? We don't require someone to have in mind when they're performing an action that happens to be a mitzvah, that they're doing this because it's a mitzvah. They can just think about the action. Shehei mitkavein ela likrot b'Torah ba'alma. They can merely be having the intention, rather, just to read from the Torah. So, final Rashi, b'korei lahagia, right? This is when the Gemara answered, the case was really where the person initially was reading in order to correct, et ha-sefer, the Sefer Torah that they were reading from. Im ish b'ta'ut, to see if there was a mistake. Da'afilu l'kriya nami lo mitkavein. That even for reading also, the person did not intend. So according to Rashi, in the beginning of the case, when we have someone haya korei b'Torah, they had the intent to correct, not the intent to read. So therefore, the Gemara says, im kivein libo, the person would only fulfill their obligation if they changed their intent from correcting to reading. Tosafot, however, disagrees. B'korei lahagia, pirish b'kuntrish she'em mitkavein likrot. Rashi explained, right, it was explained in Rashi that he did not have intention to read. Tema akati hakakare. But it's a wonder because he was still reading. Behold, he was still reading, right? That was Gemara's rejection in the first place of saying that kavana means to read. And still, according to Rashi's explanation, the person was reading in the beginning of the case. Yes, they were reading to correct, but they were still reading. So Toso gives their own answer. Al karchachad, right, we're against our will, we have to explain. Nir b'korei lahagia she'eno korei hatevo kechatan v'kenukudatan. So it seems that in the case of reading to correct, that the person was not reading the letters according to their halacha and with their vowels. Ela k'ktivatan kare k'dei la'avim b'chasero u'yitiro. Rather, the person was reading according to the way the words were written in order to understand what was missing or what needed to be added. What was missing or what was extra. Kimo litatefet umizuzat, right? So in the Sefer Torah, there aren't nikudot, and that includes vav, sometimes a vav that right, a vav that sometimes serves as a nikudah. So this word, right, we would pronounce it litotafot as part of Kriyat Shema, the way that our Masorah of the nikudot that should be there. But someone reading it from a Sefer Torah with no concern about the nikudot, they might read it litatefet, right? They might read, instead of mizuzot, they might read mizuzat. V'im kivein libo lav dafka. And when the Mishnah said, if he has intention in his heart, it's not specifically referring to intention, right? Something that's happening mentally. Ella kilomar likrot kedin kinukudatan v'kilchatan. Rather, it's as if to say, to read according to the judgment of what nikudot there should be and according to the halacha of the reading. So therefore, according to Tosafot, when someone wants to fulfill their obligation, they need to simply do the action correctly. Kavana doesn't actually mean intention, it just means performing the action correctly.